Most of us have been living, deploring our natural abilities, and that's why we are limited. And so I realized one of the callings of the believer is to harness the abilities of God on his inside. And on the strength of that ability he taps into, he has something to offer to his generation. The reason Christianity is reduced to religion and religious practices is because men have not tapped into the frequency of God in their spirit. And there are many scriptures that began to come to mind. In Philippians chapter 2 verse 13, it says, "For it is God that worketh in us, both to will and to do of his good pleasure." Now, if it is God that is working inside me, how can I be defeated? So everything you see me doing, I am just a vessel that God is using in order to affect a system, in order to affect a territory, in order to affect a nation. And so a believer is therefore supposed to become an agent of emancipation. Christianity does not begin and end in the four walls of the church. So when you go to the bank, you are doing what they are doing based on what you were taught. But you see, God did not go to the university. And so the many things you are able to do in that bank is beyond what you learned in the university. Because the God working on your inside is not a graduate. He is the author of knowledge. And so you have the power beyond your job description to bring the kingdom of God to that sphere. If you are in the world system, you should be there demonstrating a dimension of God so brilliant that makes the people realize that you are the answer to their cry. And so every time they need wisdom, the first point of reference and consultation should be you. And on the strength of that prime position that you are placed because of the ability of God you have, you now begin to give direction to systems and to institutions. Genesis chapter 4 verse 26. And he said, from the days of Enosh, he said, men began to call on the name of the Lord. One man has the power to influence a nation. One man has the power to influence a generation. Men were not calling on God. They didn't bother about God until Enosh rose. Is it possible that the problem we have in society today is not a problem of society, but is a lack of the rise of men? Why is the media in decadence? It's not because of the innovations from here. It's because a man of sufficient stature has not risen in the media. If a man of stature rises in the media, there is something he can do that will lead the media in another direction entirely. But you see, if you think Christianity is about coming to church to attend fellowship, you will not know where we came from. If men, and it didn't say Christians, it didn't say certain specific descendants. It says so long as you are a man in that era, you are under law to seek God. And the reason you are seeking God is because somebody called Enosh rose. Now, the kind of ability required to stir that kind of influence cannot be human. It means that guy tapped into the ability of God that was on his inside. If you tap into the ability of God that is on your inside, systems will depend on you. Nations will depend on you. Generations will depend on you. And that's when purpose will be born. There is something in us that we have not explored. There is a divine capacity that is on our inside that we have not begun to harness. You know, when you study the Bible, you will think the gospel is just about Jesus. No. The gospel is not about Jesus alone. There are two sides to the gospel. The first side of the gospel is about the divinity of Christ as the Son of God and what he has done. That's the good news. The second side of the gospel is what we have become because of what God has done. That's why after you have the four synoptic gospels, you also have the Acts of the Apostles. If the Acts of the Apostles is not there, there will be no way to test the efficacy of who Christ is, what he claims he is, and what he has done. And so there is a side of the gospel that reveals to us who we are and empower us to begin to manifest it. That side of the gospel has not yet been explored. If 10 of us discover the ability of God that is on our inside, Nigeria is too small. If Enosh could influence the whole human race, and he said, men, whatever belief system didn't matter, men began to call on the name of the Lord because one man was able to tap into a frequency. Why then are we in our millions and our nation is not transformed? It means we don't know what we carry. There is something that God has put in us that we have not found. Our coming to church is still largely religious. Thank God for the healings. Thank God for the miracles. But you see, the ability of God is not only reflected in correcting the deficiencies in our mortal bodies. The ability of God should also affect and impact on everything that is in the visible creation, from systems to civilizations to territories. But that will only happen if men begin to tap into their abilities. We have preached our humanity and we have rubbed off our humanity on our faces. It is time for us to also begin to draw out our divine side. Nobody is disadvantaged. There is something of God that is in every one of us. What we need is the intelligence of harnessing it. Go home with a burden. And don't let this burden be aborted. Keep asking yourself, what is the divine element that is on my inside? What is the divine side